This is a recording for the CUPHAT project. My name is Chris McCann. Today is the 12th of July 2023 and I have with me here Kathleen Holohan. Thank you, Kathleen. Can you confirm for the recorder that you are happy to take part in this project?
Yes, I'm happy, Chris.
And could you spell your name for the recorder, please?
Okay. Kathleen Holohan.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll start sort of right back at the beginning. Perhaps if you could tell me what year you were born and perhaps your earliest memories.
Okay. I was born in 1960 and my earliest memories, I can remember my first day at school clearly. I remember my mum brought me and she says I never looked back, that the teacher took my hand and that I never looked back. And of course she was very disappointed that I didn't look back, but anyway. And I remember the teacher gave me a little black slate. They were in use at the time and she showed me how to draw a simple little drawing of a cat. And that was it. No tears or anything after that. So that's one of the more vivid memories. Before that again, I have a very distant recollection. I was only maybe about two and a bit maybe. And my brother, who's just over a year younger than me, became ill with appendicitis, and he had his system was poisoned by the appendicitis, and he was at death's door, we'll say, but he recovered, and I can remember going to the hospital with my mother to bring him home. I can remember the nurse coming out with him in her arms. So that's a long ways back. So that's my really, really earliest one. So there you have it. Those are two of the more vivid ones.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school in Clonroach, which is in the neighbouring parish to here where I live now. So I would have started quite young because I discovered afterwards they were trying to get in some extra numbers to build a new school. So I started, it wasn't that I was quite young, I was 5, but I discovered afterwards that I skipped a class, that they were trying to get in lots and lots of children, so some children were moved on quite quickly. And as a result, I was quite young going through school. And for years I wondered why, because I could remember I was 5 when I started. So I discovered afterwards that was the reason, that I skipped a year. So there you have it. So Clonroach is the neighbouring parish to here. Yeah.
And did you grow up around Clonroach?
Yes, we were a couple of miles from the village. Yeah, we were indeed, yeah. So we would have walked to school most of the time. I think I remember when we were very small, we got a lift with a neighbour. The small children got a lift with a neighbour. But then when you were old enough to walk, you walked the 2 miles or thereabouts. And then we would have gone on bicycles too, I remember. And then the bus came, a free bus came then eventually. So we were bused to school. So that was absolutely gorgeous. You can imagine. Better than the walking or on the bike. So that was terrific, to be bused.
And did many people have cars then?
Very few had cars. Most of our neighbours didn't have cars. Mostly farmers would have had cars, and I suppose people maybe in better jobs, better paid jobs, that sort of thing, the way. But generally speaking, most of our neighbours didn't have cars through the 60s. So it was on Shanksmere for us on foot or on the bike to most places, So it was obviously very different to now. The 60s it was very, very, very different to now. Ireland was still sort of struggling to find its feet, we'll say. And, after the World War and all that sort of thing, generally people were, sort of quite poorly off, you know what I mean? There wasn't much money stirring. Everything had to be counted carefully, Absolutely.
And what was your family farmers? What did they do?
No, we weren't farmers. My father worked on a farm. He worked on a neighbouring farm, and there was 8 of us. I'm the eldest of 8 children, so he was a busy man keeping us all going. So he worked on through the 60s. He would have continued working on the farm. He mostly looked after the dairying end of it on the farm. He milked the cows morning and evening, 7 days a week. And did other jobs around the farm in between, but that was his main duty, was the dairying end of it. So then coming up to the 70s, he left that. He got a job in New Ross in what were they called? Oh yeah, Ross Company. They were a shipbuilding company, and they were going very well, and an awful lot of local people got jobs there. So he picked up a job there, and at first he got a lift with a friend, and then eventually the money was way better than what he had been earning, way better. He couldn't believe his eyes basically, and eventually he was able to buy a car, his first car. So then he continued with them for a few years, and then they eventually folded, they closed, and he finished up then with Wexford County Council for the rest of his working life. So three main jobs throughout, and he sort of prior to getting married, he would have worked on farms as well in the locality here and there. That was the main source of employment really. Most people worked on farms. That was the way it was,
And had he grown up in the area as well himself?
Yeah, he was from the Clonroach area. He was, yeah. My mum was from Ferns in the north of the county, and she came to work in the kitchens of the farm where he worked. So that's how they met. So they got married then in early 1960. And the rest is history.
And you've described your father's schedule when you were growing up. What about your mother?
My mother would have worked in the home. Yeah, when we were young, she worked in the home. Always, she was always there. She didn't go very many places. She never drove. But besides, we didn't have a car anyway. So she would go to Clonroach on the bicycle maybe once a week. And when we were old enough, we did the shopping for her in local shops and that sort of thing. So she wouldn't have stored very far from the home. Now, when we were growing up, all right, she did a couple of part-time jobs. She became a priest's housekeeper, and she worked on a mushroom farm, picking mushrooms, and she did some strawberry picking as well. So when we were flown the nest, she had a bit of independence that way, we'll say. You know what I mean? She had her own little job, so she was delighted with that, to get out and about.
I might come back to the strawberry picking a bit later. Perhaps you could tell me what was your schooling like, both in primary school and then secondary school? Yeah,
well, I've spent 8 years then in Clonroach National School, and then I went to secondary school in the Convent of Mercy in Enniscorthy. And of course, I started there in 1972. Secondary education was very new to Ireland then. It came in the late 60s. Free secondary education and free transport, which was huge. It made a massive difference to us. But for that, we wouldn't have been going, basically. That was, you'd have had to pay a fee, plus there was the transport issue. So those two things together opened up the education world for us big time. So I was 5 years then in secondary school, completing my inter-cert and leaving cert. And then I had always wanted to be a primary school teacher from a very young age, always. So I managed to get myself a place in the training college, as it was called then. And I went to Carysfort College in Blackrock in Dublin for 3 years. And I did my degree there for primary school teaching. So lo and behold, when I was finished, there were 2 vacancies in the local school where I went to school, and I got one of them. So I spent 38 years teaching there, and I retired 5 years ago, 2018. And it was a great experience. Some people said, oh, don't go back to your local school, whatever, but I always loved it. And I had a great 38 years there. And then following retirement then, I did a bit of home tuition with a little special needs girl who was too sick to go to school. So I did 2 years with her as well, and that was lovely, the one-to-one. And getting to know her and to work with a person with a disability was terrific, a great experience. So retired now and making the best of it, living the life. So, did I miss anything there, Chris?
No, I think that's right. I think it's interesting that you mentioned there some people saying, "Oh, don't go back to the old school." Had much changed in the years between when you left high school and when you came back?
Well, it was the same. There'd been an extension on the building, which was a bit bigger, and there was a couple of more teachers there. Maybe there was 4 in my time. There was 5 or 6 then, but not vast changes. But the curriculum, the education system would have changed. When I was going to school myself, there was a lot of emphasis on the 3 R's, as we call them, the reading, writing and arithmetic, and a bit of history and geography thrown in, whereas the newer curriculum was broader, like PE and art, a bit more work on the geography and history and environmental studies, and it was much more varied than when I was going to school. So that was nice to see that, and of course over the years it got bigger and better. We saw a lot of changes from the time I started till the time I retired, with the introduction of computers and internet and screens and all sorts. It was unbelievable, the difference when I left. Really unbelievable in those 30 odd years. Incredible, absolutely.
And what about the village of Clonroach itself? What was it like when you were a child?
It was obviously a lot quieter than it is now. It is on the main and escorting New Ross Road, so it would have, I suppose there was a good bit of I know there wasn't much traffic then, but it was still busy enough. So, a couple of shops, a couple of pubs, village hall, that sort of thing, a few houses dotted around. And then when I started teaching, there'd been a new housing estate had just opened. I think there would have been maybe 40 houses in it. And there was a flood of young families and young children coming then. So that created those 2 jobs I talked about at the time. So then over the years, there's been a couple of more housing estates built. And basically it's still the same. Shops have changed hands a bit and more cars on the road, buses, lorries, all sorts passing through now. There's a constant stream by the school gate. It's on the main road, so it's a very busy road. So those sort of changes, going with the times.
And obviously you've come back to live and work, near or in where you grew up.
Yes.
Would that have been common in those days, or did people leave?
It would still have been fairly common. I suppose in the past it was considered a sort of a wonderful thing to get a job back in your own locality. It was handy, it was near home and all that sort of thing. But a lot of people were spreading their wings, and they would have sort of disliked that sort of situation. They'd prefer to be away from people that they knew or children that they knew. The way it's a bit difficult to draw the line sometimes. When you're dealing with children, you've got to be very careful about certain things. But some did go for it, including myself, and never look back. You just have to sort of adjust to it, and there will be people very well, and you'll be teaching their children. I taught my youngest sister; she was in infants with me, and that one is, it can be difficult, from a disciplinary point of view, and not showing favouritism and all this sort of carry on. So a lot of people say that you're hardest on your own. So that probably is true. You have to be, And so you run into those sort of little things too. I had all my nieces and nephews, any of them that were living locally. I had them all over the years as well. And again, it's an adjustment for them as well as you. As a teacher, you have to be kind of a different sort of person to auntie or whatever, So, but we got through, no bother at all. You get used to that situation, And lots of the families I would have known, or I would have known some part of their families. So, and then in a way that helps too, to have a little bit of knowledge, about a little bit of background knowledge of the children and their families, and whatever kind of situations they might be in. So that helped as well in its own way. So there you have it.
You mentioned that your father had a 7-day sort of schedule at one point, working on the farm there. Did he ever get away? Did you ever get away for holidays as a family during that time?
No, there wouldn't have been any holidays. The only thing we would have done, we would have gone to Ferns occasionally to visit my mother's people and maybe stay overnight with our grandparents now and again. An occasional day at the beach. Again, a lot of it was sort of to do with transport. The lack of transport was a major thing, so we wouldn't have stirred very far. We'd have gone to hurling matches and sort of local stuff. There would have been field days, as they were called, in the parishes then, where there were lots of sort of side shows and games for the day, and there was 2 main ones in the parish, and we would go to those every year and looked forward to them. But as regards holidays, no, there'd be nothing like that at all. It couldn't be, I suppose, afforded, as well as the transport issue. It just wasn't the done thing, really. We made our own fun. here and there at home, you know.
And what would you do? What sort of things?
I suppose the summer holidays were spent, a lot of it spent sort of, now we would have done chores for our mother and father as well. We would have done shopping. We'd have gone to the local shop for her and maybe walked or cycled. We would have done jobs around at home, different chores. We had the strawberries, of course, and different odds and ends around the home. And we would have wandered down the fields on fine afternoons, down the fields and laneways, and just entertained ourselves really. I had a few things written. I'll just have a quick look, see if it triggers anything. A picnic on a Sunday maybe. We would pack up just a simple picnic, maybe a few biscuits and some dilutable orange and maybe a cake if we were lucky, and we would head off down the fields or down the woods. And we loved that. We loved the freedom. It was great. We didn't appreciate it at the time. And we liked to visit. There's a place called Castleborough near here, and you may have heard of it, Chris, and we would often visit there, maybe for the picnic as well. You could go into the grounds. It was privately owned, but you could go in around the grounds at that time anyway. And we did a lot of reading. We were a big reading family and loved the books. And I did a bit of Irish dancing myself. And then in the winter time we had the tops of the parish. You may have heard of that as well. I think there were six groups in Clonroach, and they would all compete against each other. A variety of talents: singing, acting, whatever, dancing, whatever you could do, and there would be a competition. So over the winter time, we would spend a good bit of time rehearsing for that. Sometimes in the local hall or in various people's houses before we were sort of ready to go to the hall. And that provided great entertainment over the winter time, and it was very good for people as well. It got them sort of doing their bits and pieces, and it sort of knocked the shy ways off, as we'll say, and got us out there in the public. And then we had pantos as well in the 70s. From the mid-70s on, we had a panto each Christmas as well, and that too, it was absolutely marvellous to have that, to participate in that and to perform at Christmas time, and we had great fun. So those sorts of things really, mostly around the locality, nothing too far away really,
I suppose that would have really helped with sort of community spirit too.
Oh, community spirit, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, till we all fell out, till all the groups fell out in the tops of the parish over who won and who didn't win. But my father was a very good actor and a good comedian, and he was sort of the mainstay of our group, in our group in Castleborough, and he was a terrific actor. Absolutely amazing, and a great comedian. So lots of people absolutely adored him when they saw him come out on stage. All he had to do was stick his head out, and people started laughing. He just had the knack, So it was great to be involved with him as well. Absolutely,
Do you remember anything that you did particularly for the tops?
For the tops, let me see. Well, in the tops, I remember once they were doing some kind of a scene from back maybe in the 1800s. I remember there was long dresses on the ladies, and I remember I was in a swing which was hanging from the roof, and I was dressed up in the style of the time, the 1800s or whatever, and I was swinging on the stage. I don't know how they put it up or anything, but there I was. And we had groups of, there would have been a little sort of a children's act where there would be choirs and different things like that, a children's choir, various acts, and with Irish dancing. And the pantos then, which we were teenagers by then, sure, we were in the dancing troupe, and we thought we were gorgeous, absolutely, in the lovely costumes and all that. That was a sort of a new thing for us. We had 7 or 8 costumes for the show, and you'd be having to change very quickly and all that sort of thing. So we were very excited about it. It was a sort of a new thing, the panto then, especially in small places, in rural places, So we thoroughly enjoyed it, absolutely. And as I said, it was great to get children, teenagers out there, and you'd be surprised what people can do given the chance, given the opportunity. And we so enjoyed it, absolutely.
And sort of the Clonroach sort of Castleborough area, they usually did fairly well in the national stage.
They did. Clonroach had a group, they did, and they entered the John Player Tops, and I think they may have got to a quarter final, I think it was, and One of their acts is featured on YouTube. If you look for it, it was some kind of a western scene. But it was a place noted for that sort of entertainment. A lot of people were interested in it, and there were some great acts and musicians, singers produced over the years. So it was, really they were into it big time. Absolutely, yeah.
I'd be interested to ask you there about Castleborough House that you mentioned.
Yes.
What would you have known about that growing up?
Well, initially on the 29th of June every year, that was where one of the field days was, in the grounds of Castleborough. Going back years and years, back I think maybe into the 1930s, it was called the Garden Party. And that came about because even before that, again, the Carews, they were living there at the time, the landlords, and Lady Carew opened the gardens to the parish for the day every year, and the school children got to go, and other people as well. So the name, the Garden Party, sort of evolved from that. And then eventually the parish ran a field day in it. So we would have gone there. That was on the 29th of June. It was a holy day, a church holy day one time, so everybody was off work. And that was, to our eyes, it was magnificent. You know what I mean? It was a great day out. And even in my mother's time, she recalls it was such a fascinating day. There was, outdoor dancing for the adults. And I often heard her say there was dancing in the afternoon. And it went on till darkness, really, and there was dancing in the evening. And she was saying you tried to have 2 new dresses for the day. And if you didn't have 2 new dresses, you wore one dress, you went home and you washed it and you dried it with the iron, and you came back in the evening with a fresh dress. So, sign of the times. But that was a wonderful occasion, and people came from far and near to it, to the 29th of June in Castleborough. So the owners, they gave the grounds for the day. So I don't know when it finished. Maybe the middle 80s. It stopped. Things were sort of, I don't know what. There was more. People were spreading their wings, and the local thing wasn't as important. But we had wonderful years in Castleborough. Wonderful, and. It's still there, the ruins, and some of the gardens are they're not kept well now, but it's a pity to see it going like that. But sure, that's the way it is. It would cost a fortune, I'd say, to renew it. It was burned in the troubled times, as we call them, in 1923. I think it was February 1923. It was burned, and it was such a great pity to see such a beautiful place going, but. That's the way, isn't it? Nothing we can do about it,
Was that ever spoken about? That there's the burning and the troubled times.
Yeah.
When you were growing up. So
no, it wasn't spoken about much, and a lot of people have the same experience that people who lived then didn't speak about it much. It was a bit sort of hush hush, But there is lots of information, about the burning of it now. On various websites you'll get information about it. But no, we never heard much about it ourselves. We just knew it was burned. That was about it, as were a lot of the big houses in Ireland at the time, which is a great pity. Yeah.
Maybe now's the time to return to the strawberries.
Okay.
I know that you have a sort of fond memories about that.
Yes.
Could you tell us about strawberries when you were?
Yeah. Well, it sort of started in the early 60s when I was a tot, we'll say, being born in 1960, and the Agricultural Institute was founded in Clonroach, just on the New Ross side of Clonroach, and they were dealing with soft fruit experiments and production and that sort of thing. And then the soil in the area is good for growing strawberries. So then some of the companies came in, the fruit companies. There was Chivers and there was Robertson's. I think they were a Bristol company, Robertson's, and they were offering contracts to, you could. I remember having a quarter of an acre of strawberries or half an acre of strawberries. So a lot of the people in our area. They would have had a little bit of ground. A lot of the county council cottages, which we grew up in, they had an acre of land with them, and we grew all our own potatoes and vegetables. And then when the strawberries came in, we were able to grow them as well. So, you know, it was a lifeline for people, the extra bit of cash, because most of the people I knew anyway were just depending on their week's wages. You know, they had nothing extra. So this was an extra bit of money coming in the door every August, and it was just a blessing, an absolute blessing. You know, people were able to, you know, like build maybe a house extension. I know we built an extension on our house at home with our strawberry money, and you know, people might be able to get a car and, you know, improve things a bit, have a bit put by, have a bit saved. So you know, it was an incredible help. It was hard work, mind you, because everybody was on board. You know, if you could pick a strawberry at all, you were out in the fields right through mostly July, maybe a bit of June, a bit of August, mostly July. So it was hard work because you know, nowadays they're grown up high and you're standing when you're picking them. In those days they were in the ground, so there was a lot of bending the back and bending the knees, and a lot of moaning and groaning over that. But we got there in the end, you know, and families made a right bit of extra money, and it helped in so many ways, you know, to boost the income. And that was the way our summers were for all through the 60s and, you know, into the 70s and all, even into the 80s. People were still growing strawberries, you know, in their back fields or whatever. But eventually, then it went to sort of bigger growers, and I think it was mostly that we had local depots where you could bring your fruit to the village in Clonroach or another local spot as well in the evening, and then they closed, so it meant you had to maybe bring your fruit to Enniscorthy or to Bunclody or to New Ross, and it sort of stopped then, you know, and eventually then it went to growing in the tunnels like it is now. It's all mostly indoor. I don't think there are any outdoor strawberries anymore, so no more worries about the weather and the sun beating down on you and the rain. So, but there were good times, and we enjoyed them thoroughly, you know what I mean. And then we were able to earn a bit of money as well, which was fantastic, especially coming up to your teenage years, you know, when you wanted to buy a bit of the latest fashion and do this and do that. It was good. It was very, very good to have the bit of money, you know. And as I said, hard work, but it had its benefits as well, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular memories that stand out from?
I remember a few things. I think I mentioned it there in that little bit I had written that I remember the moon landing clearly. I remember we were allowed to come in from the field to watch it on the telly. And I mean, we were totally amazed. That was 1969, I think, when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And I can remember we were allowed in for the couple of hours to see that, and then back to the field again. I mean, it was just such an amazing thing at the time. So that's one of the memories that sticks out clearly in my mind. And I remember things too, like, you know, the worry over the weather. You know what I mean? My father would always be looking for it to be nice and wet and rainy in May, because it sort of allowed the fruit to grow and to swell up. You'd have big strawberries. And then the worry if it was too dry in the picking, you know, that wasn't good either, because the plants would shrivel up and there was no way of watering. And then, of course, if there was rain, the fruit would rot, because the strawberries just don't last. They're one of the fruits that don't last at all. So there was, you know, you felt the worry too of your parents too about that at certain times of the year. But and then we had pickers would come from Enniscorthy as well. If some people had bigger crops, bigger acreage, and they would get a busload of pickers from Enniscorthy, and we found them very different. You know, the townies as we call them. We found them very different from ourselves. You know, but we got to know quite a few of them, and you know, we'd meet up again. Maybe we met up again then in secondary school when we got into Enniscorthy secondary school. But no, we had no trust in the townies at all. We allowed, they weren't real strawberry pickers like ourselves at all. So, you know, those sort of things, yeah. So it's, you know, it was the mainstay of our summers for years and years, really. And of course, even towards the end of June, if the strawberries came in a bit early, people kept children back at home for the last week in school. But I think you'd rather be in school, because if you weren't in school, you were picking. So anyway, that was the way it was. It was a bit of extra help, and people helped out each other. Not everyone had transport to bring their fruit to the local depots, so people who had tractors or cars helped people who hadn't. So, it was a real community effort. And also, we'd have helped out neighbours with picking as well. Myself and my brother Jim, we would have, when we got, we were 12, 13 age group, we would have gone to pick for our neighbours to give them a bit of a help out as well, that sort of thing. So it was all a big community thing, as well as the hard labour and the hard work. But anyway, it was nice when the cheque came in August. I can remember it so well. We'd take a trip to Enniscorthy for the day, and I can remember we didn't have a car in the early years, and my mother and father would hire a local hackney driver to take us into Enniscorthy for the day, and that was terrific of the time. I mean, we were never in town. We did all the shopping was done locally. In our nearest shop was Joyce's, and then in the village of Clonroach. So we were never in Enniscorthy. Just that day in the summer and Christmas, through the 60s anyway. The 70s was a bit different, all right. People were becoming a bit more sort of prosperous, especially with the free secondary education. By the time the sort of early middle 70s came around, there were people coming out of secondary school. They were able to get better jobs, do apprenticeships, go to college, so they had a bit more independence, get mortgages, build their own houses, that sort of thing. So it was a bit more up to date then, compared with the 60s. But there you have it. So
that's wonderful. You're living a bit closer to the mountains now.
Yes, I'm a bit closer to the mountains now. Yes.
So can you tell me about perhaps the move and how long you've been here?
We've been here. We got married in 1984, and we lived in Clonroach for a short while. We rented a house in Clonroach for a few months. I think it was a year and 7 months. Yes, we were married in 84, and we moved here in Christmas 85. We had a baby by then. She was 7 months, so we moved up here when she was 7 months old. So we're here a good spell now, up here near the mountains. So I suppose I didn't move very far really. I'm only maybe 15 minutes drive from my home place, so I didn't move very far, just a little bit closer to the Blackstairs. And of course it was still very handy for work as well. It was only a short drive for work. And so in the early years, my husband worked for an oil company, and then he ran his own business, oil distributing business, for a long number of years. And he was also very involved in hurling. So a lot of our time was, as you probably know by now, hurling is a big thing here and where I come from. So he was involved with both the club and the county for a long number of years. So we would spend a lot of our time on weekends going to matches. That was kind of our social life. And of course all the kids were the same, you know what I mean? They were all involved all the way up, so that's the big thing up here, the hurling. It really is. And you've probably heard of the records of Callan on your travels. You've heard all that. So and of course it's still very strong here as well. You know what I mean? Every child plays, or attempts to play anyway. They have a go, and it's really very strong still. So that was we've 3 girls, and one is in Australia. She's in Melbourne, and the other 2 are teaching locally. And we had a son as well, but he died 9 years ago. He had a heart condition that hadn't shown itself up to then, so he died suddenly 9 years ago. So, that took its toll on us. But thankfully, we've come out the better side of it, and we're going strong, So it's nice to have the girls around locally. And of course, we miss our daughter in Melbourne, but we hope to get out to see her shortly as well. But so that's the size of it then. So the change wasn't huge really, because as I said, I'm near to home anyway. But of course I have to row in with the Rathnure Hurling Club now. I can't be seen to be following the club on to the club anymore, even though my father played for them. He played in the 40s and 50s, and he won a couple of medals with them. So there's always a bit of a, friendly banter between the 2 neighbourhoods about hurling, friendly rivalry. It's still there. But sure, that's part of it. That's what makes it. It does indeed,
Are there any other differences between just the parishes, even just from from here back to
yeah, I suppose from a physical difference, I suppose you have the land up along the side of the mountain, and the farmers who live up the slopes a little bit. It's kind of a, it would be very different from the lower lands, we'll say, and more isolated. Some of the mountain lanes, they're a long drive up, and people are even still a bit isolated. They seem to be a long ways from civilization, but I suppose if you've always lived in those places, you don't realise that. You know what I mean? But not huge differences other than that, the same sort of lifestyle really, I suppose Enniscorthy would have been more our local town when I was at home. Here we're sort of the same distance from New Ross and Enniscorthy, so we go to both places for shopping and whatever. But not huge differences, mostly the same lifestyle really, Did
you have any connection with the mountains growing up? Because you mentioned going into Enniscorthy was a big treat. Did you come west at all?
Towards the mountains, no. We would have, gone up to Mount Leinster a couple of times, to the, what's it called, that place where you can go up to the Nine Stones, as they call it. You can park there and things like that, but no great connection with the mountains at all, really. We could see them clearly from our home and all that sort of thing, but you'd look up at the mast on Mount Leinster and that, but no great connections. The people here would have had more in that sense, obviously, with some of them living there anyway. I think there was a Sunday they used to go in July. What's it called? They call it Mountain Sunday, which they've revived a bit in the last few years actually. There would be music and singing and dancing. They used to go up to a place called the Meetings, and they would meet some of the Carlow people coming up from the other side, and they would have a bit of a session for the day, a bit of food and singing and dancing, and they've revived that in recent years. It had sort of faded out since the 70s, but the last 2 or 3 years they're getting it going again, and they've had a few people up there the last couple of years, including my brother-in-law Tony was involved in the music business, and he's been up there, so that's good fun. Nice to see an old tradition revived again, and it's probably easier to get up there now. The tracks are better, and you probably can drive up a bit of the way as well. It's not all on foot. So, but that's, I suppose, the people here in this district are more connected with the mountain. They are indeed, absolutely.
Do you think there'd be any prospect of reviving, say, the Castle Borough, the garden?
I doubt it now. Some of the gardens are turned into farmland now, and it wouldn't have been maintained over the years. So I doubt it. I doubt it now at this stage. It's probably gone too far, in that direction. It would be lovely to see, all right, or even it would be lovely to see maybe even a part of the castle restored, for a little cafe or a museum or something, but it's also costly. The money creeps up big time into the thousands, millions maybe. But that was always a big focus of our childhood, the castle at Castleborough, absolutely.
What are the big changes you've seen in the area from your childhood to now?
From my childhood to now, well, of course, we'll say transport. Through the 60s, there was simply none, really, or very, very little transport. Education, of course, is a big thing. As I was saying before, since the free secondary education came in, it's made just the world of a difference. Like, it's changed people's lives completely. I suppose when we were kids, everything was very local. You didn't stir too far, but now basically, obviously, you can do whatever you want. And within the education system that I worked in, all the kind of stuff that's done via the internet now, and it's just so different to when I started. As colleagues of mine often say, we were the chalk and talk brigade. All we had was the blackboard and the chalk and our own voices. They were the only sort of teaching aids we had. Maybe a cassette recorder, but nowadays, when I finished up, like, it's just amazing, all the technology and how good it is for education, how amazing it is, So those sort of things really, the education, transport, and just people's sort of opportunities have increased immensely. the opportunities for travel outside of Ireland and working outside of Ireland. And now I suppose a lot of people did go in the 50s, the 40s and 50s. An awful lot of people went to England, mostly England, some America, some Australia, but mostly England after the war. Half the place was gone because there was a lot of work rebuilding places after the war years, and most people would have went. My father was actually born in Swansea, and his mother died when he was only 3, and they came back to Ireland. His father took them back to Ireland, and they were reared by their grandmother. But his 3 siblings, they all went back to England to work when they were old enough, but he didn't. He was the youngest, and he stayed with his granny, and he didn't stir. But the vast majority of people were gone. And then I suppose things got a bit better then through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then, well, the 80s now were tough enough too. A lot of people went to America and Australia. There was a bit of an economic slump there as well. And so that's the way, I suppose, with Ireland quite a bit. People come and go, depending on the economy. Sometimes you're forced to go, that sort of thing. But those are the main changes, really, I suppose. The world has opened up, really, basically. There's been vast changes since the 60s. Incredible, Did
the people who emigrated ever come back to visit, or did they come back at all? Or?
Oh yeah, the people who went to England in the 50s, they would always come. All our neighbouring families, they would all have had people in England, and they would always come religiously for the fortnight's holidays every summer. They would come from England for usually the 2 weeks. And at the time, it seemed to us that England was the most amazing place. You had these people coming with these glamorous clothes and up to date to the last, and they seemed to have good jobs. I suppose in the building business, in factories and that sort of thing, and women were working, which was quite a new thing. Their wives were working as well, so it seemed very glamorous when they came home for the summer holidays. So everyone had the same situation where people would visit every summer, and they'd be looking forward to it, and whatnot. So a lot of the families in the locality had the same situation. You'd have the English visitors for the 2 weeks.
And when they came back, would they want to just sort of stay local, or would they like to travel a bit?
They mostly stayed local, visiting family, and they would stay in the family home. And then if a wife or husband was from another county, they would maybe go and visit for one of the weeks. With say the wife's family, with her family for one of the weeks. So mostly local, staying with family. Having a few nights out in the local pubs and that sort of thing, catching up with people, So, as I say, England seemed the most wonderful place at the time. It seemed to us anyway, But, an awful lot did go in the 40s and 50s. So, everybody has relations in England and still has, you know what I mean? Descendants of those people, Mm-hmm.
And obviously you have 2 children living here locally and 1 overseas.
Yes.
What sort of pull is there for young people to either stay or go from this area?
I think money is a big thing. I know in Australia anyway, people seem to get. I know the standard of living now is higher, but people seem to get paid quite a bit more than they do here, and the Middle East as well is a very big attraction for teachers, especially teachers, nurses, doctors. Same Australia, teachers, nurses and doctors, or engineers, those kind of people, those kind of qualifications. So it seems money is a big thing. Money and opportunity. I suppose we're a small country realistically, and people will spread their wings, but the money, I think, is the big one. I think it is, yeah. It seems to draw a lot of people away. They can. What a lot of people seem to be doing is maybe go to Australia for a few years, save up, come back, then maybe be able to buy a site or build a house, something like that. That they can save a bit. But again, they work hard too. As the standard of living, things are more expensive in the likes of Australia. So even though they earn more, well, you will spend it too unless you're careful, we'll say. But It is a big draw, extra money. It is, yeah, because it's really hard to get a mortgage here now, and you have to have an awful lot saved to get a mortgage. And if you can go abroad, save a few bob and come back, then you might be able to get the mortgage and to build your own home. So yes, definitely the money's a big one. Definitely is. As always. And then I suppose people maybe don't marry as early now either. They don't start families as early, so they like to travel for a few years, take that freedom, spread your wings. That's another big one. I suppose back the years there was maybe a little bit more pressure to sort of marry, settle down, that sort of thing earlier. But now you can do as you please, basically. You know what I mean? So that's a big attraction as well. That sense of freedom, that you're not sort of, you can just take off and come back whenever, And then of course the contact, with FaceTime and that sort of thing makes it a lot easier. The likes of us, that we can talk to our daughter whenever we like and see her face on FaceTime makes it an awful lot easier for us and her. That the breakaway from home doesn't seem so distant or so long, So that sort of thing helps as well, big time, absolutely, compared with just a phone call or a letter. You can keep in touch. She has the local news sometimes before I have it. That's the way it is. I get a WhatsApp about something that's happened locally that I haven't heard of. So that's the joys of it. Mm-hmm.
I'd like actually to return back to the musical culture and the tops and the performing around the time that in sort of 67s and 80s. Archaeological and Coastal. Who were perhaps the big stars? You mentioned your father. Were there any others that really stood out?
Yeah. The producer of our local group in Castlebar was Tim Flood. You might have heard of him. He hurled with Wexford, and he was into music and performance on stage, and he was terrific for getting things like that going. And he had the great knack of including everybody. He could find something for everybody to do. Man, woman, or child, they got something to do. He found them something to do, and he would have been one of the mainstays of the tops of the parish, of keeping them going, keeping the interest going. And even after that, he would have entered other competitions with local people, local children. The GA had a competition that's still going, Score it's called, and Score in Og, and various different entertainment competitions over the years. He would sort of kept that going. So he was very good for that. Apart from his hurling days, he was really good at getting stuff like that going. And generally around Clonroche there was a good buzz about stuff like that. People enjoyed it and were very enthusiastic about it, absolutely. But he was one of the main ones now from the locality, I would have to say, who kept it going and had a huge interest in it, And he really believed in people and put them out there and got something for them to do, whether you liked it or not. So he was terrific.
You're describing a really sort of close-knit community there. From what I've sort of experienced of this area, there certainly is that still, but has that modernity, has that ability to make easy contact with people through FaceTime, and has that changed the way communities operate at all?
Well, when I was a kid, we had neighbours visited all the time, and we visited them. You were in and out of people's houses all the time. I remember there were neighbours of ours down the road, and they got the first television on the road, and we were welcome to go whenever we liked. All the children went to see. I remember going to see Lassie and the Virginian in particular. So we were in and out of each other's houses the whole time. Nobody minded anybody, and our neighbours would have called regularly. 3 or 4 neighbours would have called every day to our house at home. We shared a newspaper with the people across the road. When they were finished reading it, they brought it down to us. So the cost was sort of halved then between the two families. And that sort of thing is gone now. It is, yeah. People don't come into people's homes anymore. They keep to themselves. They're there if you need them. I mean, people are very good. We've very good neighbours, and everybody has. And but people just do their own thing now. They don't come in and out of people's homes as much as they used. You text somebody. They might be only next door. You text them about something or other. And I remember some years ago, we were laughing about it. Our youngest daughter was upstairs, and she texted down to us for something or other. And I said, "Oh, that's it. That's the limit now. This has gone past it altogether. Just carry on." But that's the way it is. The sort of neighbourliness has gone. Now, people, as I say, people are there, and they're very good if you need them. But other than that, people sort of keep to themselves. That's the main thing. In our youth, people were in and out the whole time, and everybody knew everybody's business and everything that was going on. So that sort of stopped now. People, keep things more private, and sure, it's nice too that you're able to do that. But still, neighbourhoods are great if there's any sort of crisis. It's just remarkable what people do. Just remarkable, especially in the rural areas. If anything goes wrong, everyone's behind you. Absolutely. No end to the help you could get. No end to it. So it's still terrific that way. The friendships and the helping out. Nobody minds at all. People will do baking and make piles of sandwiches and do anything like that. So it's still very good. It's still there, but not as visible. Not as visible on a day-to-day basis like it used to be. So I suppose I think that's still there very much with Irish people. The friendliness, and the welcome and looking out for each other. It's still very strong in communities. And the GA, the hurling clubs, they're brilliant as well for bringing people together and looking after all the kids, and they will also help out in times of crisis as well. All their members will help out in various ways. So that they will be one of the strongest sort of community things at the moment, all over Ireland, I'd say, not just here. So still there. Ireland of the welcomes, as they say. It's still there.
What do you think are the advantages of living in a place like this?
Well, I'm a lover of nature, and the open air, the views, lovely local places to walk, and quietness. So that's what I love about living in rural Ireland. And I just couldn't imagine myself living in a built-up area at all. But that's the main thing that I like about the rural area, the nature, the forest, the trees, the birds. That's what I love. Walks in the wood, walks on the beach, that sort of thing. Again, you have your few neighbours around you that you know well too, and you going up and down the road and say hello or whatever. So that's the main thing that I prefer to living here to any place else. Just the peacefulness, the countryside. Yeah, absolutely.
Where would be perhaps your favourite places to go?
My favourite place in the whole world, I think, is Curracloe Beach. It's one of my favourite beaches, and I just love it. All that golden sand, it's just gorgeous. And we'd still go, not as much as we used to go when the kids were here, but we'd still make a visit a couple of times a year. So that's my most favourite place in the whole world, is Curracloe Beach. Any of the beaches really. We're not too far from really, about 25 kilometres, I suppose. Duncannon is another lovely beach, lovely seaside village. We like to go there as well. And my husband, when we go to Duncannon, Jimmy always remembers when he was in school that the school outing, the school tour, was to Duncannon Beach every year, rain, hail or shine, and he has fond memories of that, when you were let kind of run wild on the beach and nobody looked out for you at all. And how different it is now, that you couldn't do that anymore. You just couldn't. But Curracloe, I really love it. Or any kind of walks really in woodland or up the mountains or whatever. And even though we go abroad on holidays, I still like the Irish holiday. And I like visiting historic sites and cemeteries of all places, and mooching around there, looking at different things. So if we're going anywhere in Ireland, I always kind of make a plan of all the places that I'm going to visit when I get there, and we do that then, So I love holidaying in Ireland, but No, don't turn down the holiday abroad either, we'll say, especially for the weather. But so that's it. But Curragh clothes tops, absolutely.
And would you have an interest then in heritage and history, and particularly around this area?
I do, yeah, I do. I love the local history. I really do. It wasn't always a thing I liked. I remember in college, I think it was second year, we had to do an essay on some kind of a local history. You could choose yourself a local history thing, and I did one on Castleborough, and I was kind of bitten by the bug. I remember I got a good mark on it, and I was thrilled with myself, and I was kind of bitten by the bug then. So since then, I have a great interest in local history. In school, I didn't at all. I remember not liking history at all. I couldn't be bothered with all that, learning dates and all that sort of thing. But then after that I did, and I took a career break in '96 when the children were small. I took a career break for a year, and coincidentally that year there was a course being run in the vocational school in Wexford. It was a diploma in local history. So I said, here goes, I can do that then. It was just one evening a week, so it was lovely to do it that year when I was at home in the daytime, and I could go one evening a week and do that. So that was it was showing us how to produce a local history document properly. That's basically what it was, the resources, where to find them, and how to record them properly and reference them properly, that sort of thing. So for the it wasn't an exam, but we had to do we had to produce a thesis or an essay on something or other in the locality using the skills we had learned that year. So I did one on the school I was working in, on Clonort School. I did the history of it from 1900 to 1950. So that was so interesting, and as well as that, I had more time to research it. I was able to take off to the National Library and to the archives and spend a day there doing this and that. And I remember once being in, I think it was the National Library, and I had an awful lot to look up in that day. I used to go on the train from Enniscorthy in the morning, and then I'd spend the day in the National Library, and I'd come home then on the 6:30 train. But I remember surviving one day on an apple. I was so interested in getting all this information. The apple did me for the day, it had to do me. But I did that document, or kind of an essay type thing, it was 96, 97. So then for the 1998, the 200th anniversary of 1798, a local lady was producing a book on the locality, history book. So a few of us who were interested in local history, we did a chapter each for the book that year as well. So we were delighted to have that printed. It was another little bit of an achievement. So nowadays I'm still interested, do a few bits and pieces of research, and I particularly like family trees. I joined Ancestry and a couple of different other things. So there's loads of information online now compared with what they used to be. So I have to say the family trees are the thing I'm really interested in these days, and I've done a lot of work on both sides of our family trees, and can spend hours at that. So it's fun. When the kids were here, they would say, "What's Mammy at?" "Oh, she's at the trees." She's at the trees. So there you are. But I love it, and it's a great pastime, especially over the winter. You can spend hours at it, and as I say, it's great now with the stuff online. You don't have to go outside the door really for a lot of the stuff. So I still retain a big interest in local history, culture, history of various different kinds. So love that, really love it. Yeah, absolutely.
If sort of putting my cup hat on here for a moment, if a tourist was to come into the area, what would be a couple of maybe local elements of culture or history that you'd recommend to them?
Yeah, well, I suppose the big one around here is Callan and the connection with John Kelly in 1798, and then there's the records collection as well, the hurlers. So I often think maybe more could be made of it. It could be linked into sort of a tourist trail, maybe a bit more. It's people sort of pass through and they don't sort of notice anything, but I'd like to see it a bit more well known, we'll say. And that would be the big thing around here. Kelly's buried in the graveyard, and the records home is over there, the pub and that. So that's the big one here. and I suppose all the different landmarks really throughout the ages. 2016 was big here as well, the commemorations for the 1916 Easter Rising, so that was very big in this locality as well, particularly Enniscorthy, and all the local schools dressed up and did their bit for the occasion. So, but round here I'd say, Records would be the big one, I suppose. Then different things about the farming up the mountains, the common land at the top of the mountains, sort of a different way of living, and there was various disputes over the years about the common land up there. Back in the 1800s, there was a big dispute. That's another one, and but that's probably John Kelly of Killan is the big one. Yeah, that's the big one. That's the one I talk about, and. It could be linked maybe a bit more with the history in Enniscorthy. You know what I mean? If they could maybe do a tour, a coach tour or something, or some kind of a trip that would include visits to Killan and that sort of thing. But the new owners in the pub now, and it's open again, so I think they have some plans in place over the next few years, hopefully, to develop maybe something in that line. So that'll be nice. I really will.
Interested actually in the you mentioned the dispute up in the commonage in the mountain. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, there was I think it was I can't think of the exact. It's back in the 1800s. One of the sort of the Gaelic chieftains that were still surviving, the Kavanaghs, they would have been up that district into Carlow, into Boris. The people had the use of the common land on the mountain for years before that, and I think one of these Kavanaghs wanted to stop that. So there was a bit of a land war about that, but the people won out eventually to get the common land back for the use of all the farmers up there. So there's quite a big dispute about that at the time, that the landlord was trying to take that from them, and they'd had it for centuries, that sort of thing. But I can't put my date on it now. It's sometime in the 1800s, yeah, but that would have been a big thing as well. And then of course Castlebar, while it's in the neighbouring parish, my home parish, Cloban, it's still very much linked with this area, because a lot of the, I think the Carews had, I think it was 17,600 acres initially, so that covered most of Cloban parish and some of this parish. So there would have been big links with the two parishes with Castlebar. So the history of that is, very interesting as well. It would be another big one in this area. It would indeed. The Carews were there right through the 1700s, 1800s, and it was kind of a summer residence. I think they didn't always stay there right the year round. They had a house in London, a townhouse in Belgrave Square, so they would have visited mostly in the summer. But some of I suppose the older generation, or back further again, would have worked in it, on the farming end of it, or the gardens, or as servants in the kitchen. So some people still have memories of things their grandparents told them about that. So that's a big one too. And the downfall of the big house, how eventually, they were going strong, I suppose, up to about 1880, 1890, and then there were sort of land wars, and tenants were starting to complain about the rent, and they were stopping paying their rent because it was gone too high, and eventually it wasn't feasible for the big houses to operate the way they had in the past anymore, so they sort of fell. That sort of situation didn't exist anymore, and a lot of them went back to England, and that was sort of the downfall, and then all the burnings, you know what I mean? So it's very interesting the way it has all evolved. So that would be a big one as well, along with Killan, Castlebar Road, definitely, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's great. You mentioned perhaps the developing those tours. Is there anything else that might help tourism flourish in this area?
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of talk. A lot of areas now have walks and trails through forests and mountain and that sort of thing. So I think that would be really one I would like to see here. There's a lot of trails up along the Blackstairs that people use anyway, but there's nothing sort of official. So I think something like that would be terrific. To link in the history of the area with that sort of thing, because an awful lot of people now avail of these sort of tracks and trails. they're a cheap day out if you have kids. Let them off on their bikes or walking, whatever. Bring a picnic, and you're out in the countryside or whatever. So that's what I'd like to see. Something like that. The mountain being made use of in that way. Because it's just beautiful up there and beautiful views, but there's nothing sort of official. I think over Kilteely way they have a couple of official walking tracks, which they promote quite a lot, but over this side we haven't. So that's what I'd like to see, something like that. To do with nature, and as I said, nice cheap day out with the kids, out in the fresh air. There's nothing like it. So that would be one of the main things I'd like to see developed. From a tourism point of view, we've a lot to offer. We don't appreciate the views ourselves, really. Out of my kitchen window, I can see along the end of the Blackstairs, and it's just lovely. But when you're living here, you don't really appreciate it. You look at the mountains in Kerry or Galway, and you're oohing and eyeing at them, but you have them here as well. So something like that, I think, would be lovely, really lovely. Yeah. So hopefully down the line, we might get something like that going. Because. People are looking for stuff like that now, the outdoor sort of simple life. So that'd be great. Love to see that. Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the biggest challenges that this area faces in the next few years?
In the next few years, I would say holding on to younger folk will be one of the big ones. An awful lot have emigrated, maybe with the intention of coming back eventually, but still, the people here are, they're very highly educated. A lot of them have very good educations and qualifications, degrees or whatever, and a lot of them are going. So it's tough to see that. I know it's good too that they're spreading their wings and they're getting whatever they want from life, but it is depleting the population quite a lot. Even the hurling teams, you hear the mentors mention that too, that it's hard to field a team sometimes because a lot of people are gone. I know the hurling isn't it's not the big thing it used to be. You know what I mean? There's other things now. One time in this area, the hurling was massive. You know what I mean? But there was less distractions. There was less opportunities. So people are going now, and you can't blame them. But that would be one of the difficulties, really. Public transport as well in the rural parts of Ireland is really non-existent, pretty much so. So, unless teenagers now, as soon as they're able to pass their test and get a car, drive a car, they really need it. You're lost out here without a car, absolutely lost. So, the lack of public transport really is massive. Even in Clonroach now, which is a big village, it's on a main road, it's on the Waterford Road, really the Waterford-Dublin Road. None of the buses stop there anymore. None of the big buses going to Waterford or to Dublin stop there anymore. So that's a shame, really. They have a little local link bus all right that connects with them, but it's a pity that there isn't a good public transport system, especially now in this era when we're encouraged to save fuel and electric cars, all this sort of thing, keep off the roads as much as you can, kind of thing. There just isn't the infrastructure there for us to do that. If you don't have your car, you're totally lost. You really are. So, maybe down the road we might get some improvements in that. I think there's one bus goes through the village, maybe on a Wednesday to Enniscorthy. That's all, really. So, there's nothing for workers. There's no incentive to leave your car at home, really, in the countryside. There's just not a chance of that. There's no bus to bring you to work or bring you home in the evening. So it'd be lovely to see improvements in that. This is one of the bigger challenges, facing us, if we're to do what's expected of us, to, carbon footprint and all this, if we're to make changes in that respect, And
is there awareness of that, the importance of biodiversity and ecology and looking after nature in this area?
Yeah, I would think it's improving. I would think so. Even in your own house, like the the recycling and stuff like that. That's we have our bin collections every week now, and our recycling bin and all that's become very big, really, and people are doing it, especially the children. I mean, I have a little niece, and she, if she sees you doing anything wrong in that respect, she'll reprimand you straight away. That goes in that bin, and that goes in that bin. And I think it is improving. I think it is improving that people are looking after the environment better. You know what I mean? As far as possible. I suppose with farmers with their dairy cows and all that, they're expected to sort of reduce the volume of cows and make changes that way. That's difficult. For the change to come, it'll take a while. And if it's going to be costly as well is another factor to make these changes. But on the whole, I would say people are more aware of it. It's on the telly and all the newspapers, everything the whole time now about climate change and being environmentally aware and making changes. So people are aware of it. Whether they'll be able to make changes or not, I don't know. Most people try to do their bit, but it's probably not enough. We may be gone too far in one direction. So, but hopefully we keep plugging away at it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sort of coming towards the end, is there anything that we haven't spoken? There might be a lot. There might be nothing. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about yet that you'd like to?
No, I think we've covered most things, really. I think so. I just made I had a few things written here. I'll just scan through them now, see if there's anything there that I hadn't come up with. Yeah, no, I think everything is pretty much covered that I had there, yeah. Yeah. Anything I had jotted down there we've actually covered, yeah, we have, yeah.
That's
lovely,
yeah. We've covered a wide range of topics, but they kind of all
they're all linked in and come together. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
That was my watch.
Somebody wants you.
Okay, we might finish with one last question that I ask everyone that we talk to with CUPHAT, and you can feel free to take your time thinking about it as well. What does it mean to you to be from this area and to live in this area?
Well, I suppose we'll get back to the GAA. That would be a kind of a mainstay all my life. The belonging to the organisation is a big thing, especially with Jimmy being so involved over the years with both club and county. It was wonderful, really, that he was involved. It was a great opportunity, and the GAA is a big thing that I would associate myself with. And also the fact that I had so much contact with all the children that I taught over the years in my own area is absolutely fantastic. To have that contact with them and their families. So, every day I go out, I run into somebody, maybe somebody I taught or some parent or whatever. So, I feel a big connection with that, and with the school in Clonroach. I would always feel a big connection with that, and the GAA. They're the two main things, really, and of course the history, the fact that I'm interested in history, and I'm interested in doing research about my forefathers or whatever, the family trees and the connections to this area, going back for so many years. So those things really keeps me well grounded here. It does indeed.
Perhaps as a last little bit, maybe if you could tell me a little bit more about your connection with the GAA and Jimmy.
Well, he played with the local club from 1977, I think. And he finished in 1998. That was his last game. So he had kind of a 20-year span with the club, and he was with the county then till 1992. So he had kind of a 14-year span with them. So he was a very good player, not very speedy, but he was very skillful. He was a free taker for both the club and the county. So that was a big thing. And we have great memories. The one big regret, well, I suppose it's not a regret, but a thing he would have loved to have done is won an All-Ireland final, but Wexford didn't at that time. They did a few years after he retired in 96, but that would be one of the sort of regrets or losses or whatever. But, he won lots of different things over the years, so he had a great career. And of course, as I was saying to you before, every weekend was spent going to one match or another, and going to different counties and different stadiums and meeting all the GAA people and all the families that were involved. It was terrific, you know what I mean? It it was hard going in a way, I suppose, in that, you know, you didn't have much else of a social life, much other of a social life while this was going on. But we had a great time, absolutely. And you know, he was a very good player, and that made it very special for me, absolutely. So we had a great time, and we still do. We still do, great memories. And you know, we always laugh, no matter where we go, somebody knows him. You know, even in different counties, somebody still knows his face. So we often laugh about that, you know what I mean, after all the years, that somebody that was connected with hurling might know you, you know, if you're on holidays in a different county or whatever. And it's a great talking point as well, the GA. It is, you know, especially in the, as I say, in the local pubs here, no matter what topic you start on, it always gets around to hurling at the end of the day. But you know, it's a great conversation opener with people, no matter where you go. So as I said, we had a great time over the years when he was hurling. It was fantastic, great to be involved. You know, others don't get the chance, so it was terrific, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, I think if there are no other things you'd like to bring up,
yeah, that's okay. That's pretty much covered. Yeah, great conversation.
No, well, thank you very much for your time, Kathleen.
Yeah,
and,
thanks, Chris.
Thanks for taking part.
Yeah, delighted. Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad everything went well.